So, you think you're untouchable?
Word life. This is basic thugonomics. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable, but I'm forcing you to feel me. Word life. This is basic thugonomics. Word life. I'm untouchable, but I'm forcing you to feel me. Whether fighting or spitting, my discipline is unforgiving. Got you backing up in a defensive position.
Greetings. Today we're here to talk about the Worcester v Georgia case. To get this started, we'll talk about a bit of the history between the Cherokee Nation and the state of Georgia. In the 1820s and 1830s, Georgia really wanted the Cherokee out of their lands. As a response, the Cherokee established a government and established themselves as a sovereign nation in 1827.
Georgia became angered and wanted to extend its jurisdiction over the Cherokees. Georgia then annexed the Cherokees' lands, got rid of their laws and their government.
Then, with the help of the other southern states, they convinced Congress to pass the Indian Removal Act, which allowed President Andrew Jackson to sign removal treaties with the Indians.
The Cherokee defended with the fact that they are a sovereign nation, but after Andrew Jackson and Congress wouldn't listen to them, their chief, John Ross, brought this case to the Supreme Court.
Cherokee Nation versus Georgia was a Supreme Court case that was set to happen in 1831, but the Cherokees lacked jurisdiction, so the case was never reviewed. They lacked jurisdiction because the Constitution never said anything about Indian nations.
Samuel Worcester was a missionary who was sent to the Cherokee Territory in 1825. Then, he moved to the capital in 1827.
Worcester helped translate the Bible into the Cherokee language. Cherokee leaders and Samuel became good friends.
Georgia didn't like Worcester's growing popularity, so in 1831 they made a law that required any Americans to get a license to visit the Cherokee lands.
As a response, Georgia had Worcester and these other ministers arrested. Worcester was later released, but he was then again arrested several months later.
Georgia gave ministers the opportunity to get a license or leave, but Worcester and some other ministers in the Cherokee land decided not to get a license, but stayed anyways.
Worcester was arrested for a third time and posted bail. So, the Cherokee Nation hired lawyers to represent Worcester and 3 other ministers. The lawyers appealed to the Supreme Court, and the case became known as Worcester v Georgia.
Chief Justice John Marshall, who was in majority, wrote that the Indian nations were distinct, independent political communities retaining their original natural rights. There were many treaties between the U.S. and the Cherokees that also acknowledged this.
The court struck down Georgia's laws that they were extended to the Cherokee Nation. Chief Justice John Marshall, who was in majority, wrote that the Indian nations were distinct, independent political communities retaining their original natural rights.
The Cherokee Nation remained a separate sovereign nation with a legitimate title to its national territory.
Marshall harshly rebuked Georgia for its actions and declared the Cherokee possessed the right to live free of the state's trespasses.
Andrew Jackson was also quoted saying, "My friends, circumstances render it impossible that you can flourish in the midst of a civilized community. You have but one remedy within your reach, and that is to remove the West. And sooner you do this, the sooner you will commence your career of improvement and prosperity."
Cherokees believed that the ruling would force the United States government into stepping in and stopping Georgia. But Georgia refused and continued holding the missionaries, and started forcing the government into trying to remove the Indians.
In 1838, the U.S. Army entered the Cherokee Nation, forcibly gathering almost all the Cherokees and marched them to the Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma, in what became known as the Trail of Tears.
Andrew Jackson didn't enforce the Supreme Court decision and told the Cherokee to either leave or follow Georgia's rules. In 1835, a faction of the Cherokee Nation signed a removal treaty in their capital.
President Andrew Jackson was quoted saying, "John Marshall has made the decision, now let him enforce it."
Widespread criticism of Georgia's imprisonment of the missionaries prompted the state's new governor, Wilson Lumpkin, to encourage them to accept a pardon.
Lumpkin convinced the Georgia state legislature to remove the laws that were used to convict Worcester and the other missionaries, and under intense pressure from their lawyers, the missionaries gave up on their Cherokee campaign and were released from jail in January 1833.
In several decisions in the latter half of the 20th century, the Supreme Court revived Marshall's assertion that the native tribes possessed an inherent form of national sovereignty and the right of self-determination.
From that point forward, the Worcester decision became the Indian Nation's most powerful weapon against the state and local encroachments on their tribal powers.